A Karen blows up and has a fit because she thought that I was a cop, but I'm actually just a 15-year-old kid, so my father and the constable totally shut her down. I was a 15-year-old boy at the time in the Police Explorers. If you don't know what that is, it's pretty much the Scouts except geared towards helping youth learn about police and eventually getting a career in law enforcement. My father was a patrol sergeant at the local constable office, so he was a supervisor. The constable was close with most of his officers and was a family friend. He had known me since I was 6 years old. I was in an explorer's uniform, so I did kind of look like an officer, but I was obviously too young. We had just gotten back from the explorers and stopped by the station so he could take care of something real fast. I don't remember what, and so I waited in front of the station for him. I sat down, put in a pair of earbuds to waste time while I waited for my father. About 3 minutes in, I feel that uncomfortable feeling you get when someone stares at you for a while. So I look up and see her. It was the dreaded Karen. Ridiculous dyed bob and all. I take out my earbuds and look up asking, "Do you need something from me, miss?" The Karen scoffed at me and said,
"Finally, you shouldn't be on your phone on the job."
She stops to look at my name on the uniform and says,
"OP, I'm gonna have a chat with your supervisor after this."
I was a little confused, seeing as I am obviously too young to be a cop, but felt like I could clear this up pretty fast. I made the mistake of stopping her and said, "Ma'am, I'm a police explorer, not a..." And that's when she snapped at me and said,
"Don't you interrupt me! I want to file a report, so get behind the desk and do your job!"
I look at her with the "you've gotta be kidding me" look on my face and decide I don't want to deal with this, so I wait for my dad outside instead. I start to walk off, admittedly another mistake on my part. Karen is a bit taken aback at first, but recovers fast and follows me, yelling and screaming about how rude I am for walking away from her and how she's going to have my badge for treating her this way. Yeah, sure lady, take my explorer's badge. Right before I get out, one of my dad's friends walked in, cop number 1, and says, "Hey Ope, where's dad? I need to talk to him." Of course, the instant he showed up, Karen just jumped on poor Cop 1 and starts going off about how I wasn't doing my job and I was rude. Cop 1 stopped her and said, "Ma'am, OP is not an officer. He's a police explorer." Karen stops and tries to process what he said, but fails to do so. Maybe she just didn't know what an explorer was, but what she said was,
"Who cares? It's his job to help me. Don't you know who I am?"
The legendary response. Cop 1 decided to drop trying to explain what a police explorer was and decided to defuse the situation. "No, I don't. Look, ma'am, if you have a problem or concern, you should go to the front desk. They should be able to help you better." At this point, this is obviously causing a scene, and another of my dad's co-workers pulls me aside as Cop 1 tries to deal with her. Cop 1 asks me, "What's going on here?" She asked me as we went a bit further away from them. I said, "Well, Miss Cop 2, I was sitting here waiting for my dad, and this lady," I gestured towards her, "started going off on me for being rude and not doing my job." I did the air quotes. Cop 2 looked at me and then back over at the Karen and then to Cop number 1 and said, "I'm sure Cop 1 will take care of this. Do you want to wait in the back for your dad?" I said yes and followed her to the back. About 3 or so minutes in, my dad comes out and sees me sitting in the back waiting for him with Cop 2. He says, "Hey, Cop 2, what's my son doing back here? Did something happen?" Cop 2 says, "Yeah, there was a woman up front harassing your son, so I took him back here to wait." My father talked to Cop 2 and said he'll take care of it. He walks off to let the constable know about the disturbance up front and not to worry about it, then comes back a few minutes later. He took me up to the front to leave. The woman saw me and my father about to walk out and made a beeline towards us, completely blowing off Cop 1 as she did. Karen says,
"Excuse me, are you her supervisor?"
My father, who literally towers over her, looks down at this Karen and says, "Yes, do you need something, miss?"
"Yes, I would like to have a talk with you about your officer's attitude."
My father looked down to me. I nodded at him as if to say this is her, and my father was about to have a talk with her, but then the constable came up front. The constable said, "OP, come to my office," in a commanding voice. I said, I looked up to my dad, a bit worried now. He said, "Go ahead." He gently pushed me in the constable's direction. So I walk over to the constable and follow him to his office. Karen looks pleased, thinking I was in trouble. Then she turned back to my father. The constable and I sat down in his office, and I looked at him confused. Your dad's told me what's going on. I didn't want you to have to deal with her. My wife made some cookies. Would you like some? Sure. I went ahead and took a few, thanking him. We sat in the office for about 2 minutes. Then the constable took me out front. At this point, Karen seemed pretty upset, obviously because my father talked her down. So I walked over to my father, and he went to talk with Cop 1 for a bit. As this was happening, Karen decided to go to the constable and started to complain. Constable interrupted her and told her something about how I was clearly a teenager and not a police officer. And even if I was an officer, she was out of line for treating his officers and me like the way she did. If she needed something, she would have to go to the front desk like everyone else. I'm not sure what happened to her after that, as we left the station pretty quickly afterwards. My dad talked to Cop 1 and Karen didn't come outside. Was she the jerk? So it turns out there's nothing more in this world that will enrage a Karen than having your earbuds in, listening to music, and not responding if they're saying something to you, regardless if you're listening to music or doing something else, or if you even have that job at all, apparently. The Karen actually said, "Who cares? It's his job to help me. Don't you know who I am?" Why would anyone in this situation know who this lady is for any reason? She doesn't even explain who she is. I mean, if they don't know, then maybe you should tell them. One of the top responses to this was a comment where somebody said that they were talking to a city cop and he told him one time that once in a while he'd run into someone who would demand, "Don't you know who I am?" And his response was to immediately get on radio and say, "This is going to be a psychiatric case. The subject doesn't know who they are." That is definitely the most genius way I've ever heard of somebody dealing with a situation where somebody says, "Don't you know who I am?" In this story, it's almost like the lady didn't actually want help. She just wanted to prove the point that she could compel the OP here to do what she wanted. It seemed like it was less about her actually needing help, because if she actually did need help about something, she would have immediately dropped this and turned to the other officer when he came out to get help. But it was more that she was upset and wanted to get the OP in trouble than actually get help for whatever was going on. I mean, at 15, you could technically be tall enough to look like you're the size of a cop. I could see that happening, but the OP couldn't even explain to her the whole situation with being an explorer, and even when the other officer did try to, she didn't want to hear it. So what would you do if you were in this situation, and jerk or not a jerk, and why? An entitled mother takes her kids to the archery range, and it all goes terribly wrong. I frequent an outdoor archery range at a large skate park. The range doesn't have an on-duty safety officer, as there's only 5 lanes, which is fine, as 99% of the people that shoot are extremely professional and polite. This is actually my first negative experience in about 2 years. So I have the range to myself, and as I'm knocking/drawing an arrow, some random kid comes up out of nowhere and runs into the range right in front of me. I retract the bow and turn around and see a mom and another kid casually walking up to the tables behind the lane. One of her sons has one of those kids compound bows, and the other has one that appears to be a wooden toy recurve. Both are between the ages of 6 and 12ish. The exchange went like this: "Hey, ma'am, I'm gonna need you to control your kids if you're out here. They can't be running onto the range when someone's shooting."
Oh, it's fine if you're out here. Just don't shoot if they're out there. They won't be shooting next to you anyway.
No, if I'm shooting, they can wait for me to finish my set before they go out there. That's how this works.
Don't tell me how to mother my kids. This is their free day and they beg me to come here.
At this point, I just said, forget it in my head and decided to be patient. I was the only other one there, and I had already been shooting for an hour and just wasn't in the mood to get into it with someone. So I continue and keep glancing over the older son, whose little noodle arms can't handle the extreme 20-pound draw of his bow. This kid is flagging everything as he struggles to draw a compound bow with his fingers. I figured I'd help him out. "Hey man, I have an extra release in my bag. It'll definitely help you draw that easier."
What did I just say? Don't tell my kids what to do!
Whoa, he's obviously struggling. I didn't want to get shot either, and he's pretty close to that too.
If you attempt to talk to my kids again, I'm calling the police.
So I should have just left, but I love archery too much, and it was a beautiful day. So the kid gives up. I stop paying attention to them and continue my business. About 5 minutes later, I'm about to set my bow down when something flies past my face, maybe 5 feet away. I turn around and see this lady's kid running around behind the range, shooting the bows at each other. Ma'am, not only did your kids almost just shoot me, but if a ranger drives by and sees that, you're going to face a pretty hefty fine.
They're just toys. It's fine.
No, it's not fine. The cops aren't going to see them as toys. They're going to see two kids shooting each other with bows. You're lucky that I'm patient.
I'm done with you. I'm calling the police. Have fun running in jail when I tell them you threatened us.
Excuse me? You know what? Fine, I'll wait here. Long story short, the park officer that showed up was actually a regular at the archery range. He recognized me, thankfully, took a statement from both of us, and ultimately banned the woman from the range. She also did not have a permit to be there in the first place, so she got fined as well. I can't believe this lady doesn't understand that these are deadly weapons. She calls them toys, but yet probably wouldn't be too happy if somebody fired one of these so-called toys at her. At the first sign of this guy probably should have either gone and found one of the range officers or just left. And also give a warning to anyone working there to know that it's very dangerous out there. Don't go out there because the kids are basically running around unsupervised shooting arrows at each other. Some of those compound bows generate so much force that they can pierce an arrow through almost anything you would find at a range, especially a human being. Someone in response to this actually included a story about their own range. They said, at my range, which allows arms and bows, they had an incident where a kid took an arrow through the neck. The mom sued the archer. She lost and owed the archer therapy compensation. I doubt he will ever get over seeing an arrow through the kid's neck. He then said, I personally have been nearly shot by a dumb entitled mom's child. She decided to let him shoot a rifle, and the kickback launched him back, and he let go of it, so when the rifle dropped, it fired again that almost hit my chest. He then went on to say that the OP is lucky he didn't get hit because it doesn't matter how old the kid is, assault with a deadly weapon means jail time for the mom. And that apparently he pressed charges when he was almost shot by that kid that dropped it because of the knockback. So if you've ever been in a situation like this, let me know down below, and let me know jerk or not a jerk and why. Am I the jerk for taking off my leg and making someone look dumb and feel uncomfortable? I'm a 21-year-old female, and I was in a very bad car accident about 3 years ago. A drunk driver ran a stoplight, cut off a semi-truck, which then crashed into me, sending me crashing into two different cars and then ultimately into an embankment. My car was mangled and my leg was crushed, completely destroyed, and it had to be amputated. I also lost a couple of fingers, the tip of one and all of another one. I'm also left with some gnarly scars that used to bother me, but I'm learning to deal with them. I got a couple different insurance payouts and some pain and suffering money in addition to my medical bills being paid, and with my money I purchased a custom-made leg to take the place of the one that I lost. When I have pants and shoes on, you can hardly tell unless you're really looking at it. I still limp, but some days I don't have as pronounced of a limp. Earlier today I went to a store with my boyfriend, my sister, her girlfriend, and our mother. I drove. I had to learn to drive with my left foot, but I'm really good at it now. I also bought a new car with my money and had to go through a ton of therapy to get past my PTSD, but I'm doing well there now as well. So I drove us, and because of my injuries, in addition to my leg, I also have chronic hip, neck, and back pain and some issues with my lungs from the time spent intubated in a medically induced coma that led to pneumonia. I have a handicap placard for my car. I have trouble walking without getting tired, so it really helps to park close to the door. Today I did so and unknowingly took the space from someone who was circling back around for it. Apparently the man had been looking for a closed space and had missed the one that I took and went down and around. He was still on the other aisle when I pulled in, so I didn't cut him off or anything and had no way of knowing he wanted that spot. He parked in the yellow stripe zone and got out and immediately began confronting me about stealing a space from people who actually need it. How I'm just some kid who has no respect for those who are truly sick and suffering. He then ordered me to move. My group was urging me just to walk away, but this has happened before, and once the police were even called. I'm sick of people thinking that just because I'm young, that I don't have a legit need for a little extra consideration. I said, okay, and went to the car and got in like I was going to drive off. I was wearing a skirt and leggings, so it wasn't quite obvious at first, but when I sat down, I took off my leg and showed it to the man, including my stump. I then asked him if it was still okay if I parked there. He just walked away calling me disgusting and rude and said that I could have just told him and I made him look stupid. My group was embarrassed and said that I made things awkward because there was a crowd. So am I the jerk for taking off my leg and making someone look dumb and feel uncomfortable? I don't think that guy will ever question somebody parking in a handicap space again, even if they look like they don't, quote, deserve to be there. And as for the OP's friends, who cares if they're embarrassed by a situation like this? They are not the ones that have to live day in, day out with people giving them a hard time like this. The OP should do absolutely whatever the OP feels that she needs to do when it comes to a situation with somebody questioning whether or not you're valid enough to be parking in this parking space. It's not like she hurt the guy or did something really crazy. She just showed him that her leg is a prosthetic leg. It sounds like the friends need a little bit more empathy when it comes to something like this and putting her feelings above their own embarrassment. But let me know what you would do if you were in this situation, and jerk or not a jerk, and why.